So I saw the second one, not in the theaters, and I wasn't as much into it, so I remember what I thought.
So the third one, the third one
Hello.
that we got, that Jackson, the director, finally got the Academy Award for.
Hey, can you hear
And
me?
then he went through, then
Hey, Bruce, can you hear me?
which.
Oh, you're muted, I think.
Sorry.
There you go. Sorry about that. I
Alright.
can hear you. Can you hear me?
Can you hear me
Yes.
better now?
I can hear you fine. Can,
Okay, good. I've had two other people on here who have been muted and I can't tell if they can hear me.
oh, okay.
Ellen and Francis, I've been trying to find out if they can actually. Oh, someone else wants to join. I will admit them. All right. Okay, so yeah, sounds like Ellen can hear me. Okay, anyone else? So yes, this is the book group that actually read the book.
Sorry that we don't have more of us here. It's kind of an off day for us.
Yeah, there were.
No, hey, always glad to talk about my favorite subject. I don't know. I don't know how you want to do it. I don't know if you had questions or you want me to launch into something or talk about whatever, but I got some cool pictures and I can show you stuff and whatever you want.
Start with the pictures.
You want the pictures?
Yeah, and I think you can share your screen maybe if that
Yeah.
works better.
Let me get this going.
Just hit this other person. All right. Well,
So I'm gonna come around the front so I can see better.
yeah, so now we've got 6 people on here.
Are you gonna sit there, Warren?
Yeah, I
Is that-
figured so I can,
I'm gonna take your seat just so I can see better.
yeah, I'm just sitting here so I can keep an eye on the
Yeah.
computer. In case anyone else wants to join.
Bruce, did you get to go in Chicago and see the actual dioramas?
The nutshell studies.
Yeah,
I worked with them for 10 years. They're at the medical examiner's office
that's
in
fantastic.
here in Baltimore. In Chicago, they have the orchestra miniature, which I have seen. But that's the only large work of hers that's in Chicago. I've seen all the nutshells. I work with them
Right,
every
I
day.
do remember now from the book that they were in Baltimore. I just had forgotten.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, you want some pictures? Are you ready?
Yeah.
Yeah,
All right. Some of this is, I don't want to be too repetitive because, oh, you disabled the screen sharing. You have to undisable me.
oh, okay, let's see, how do I do that? Let's see, how do I allow other people to share screens? Hold on. Okay, I'll make you a host.
Yeah.
That works.
There we go.
Yeah, now I think you should be able to do that.
Yeah. Now, hopefully, this isn't, you can see that there?
Yeah,
So I'm just going to go through a lot of it because I know you want to get to the pictures, the good stuff, but just let's see, how can I get this? Whoops, there we go. So this is where I worked for 10 years, was the executive assistant to the chief medical examiner for the state of Maryland. This place was at one time quite renowned. It was celebrated as the gold standard of forensic medicine. My next book, in fact, which is coming out in February, is documents these 10 years and sort of the rise and fall of a great institution. I can talk about that, but in any event, it's a very cool building. It takes up an entire city block in Baltimore. It's basically a hospital for dead people. It has laboratories like a hospital has, and it has an X-ray department. And this particular room is for neuropathology, where they study brain and spinal cord. And those windows to the left and the right overlook, they give you this bird's eye view down into the autopsy room, which looks like this. It's not at all like they show on television. There are always these dark subterranean spaces, but this is one of 2 main autopsy rooms. There's 8 stations in here and 8 stations on the other side. They could do what, 22 autopsies simultaneously. Unlike what they show on TV, the police and people aren't inside the autopsy room when the work is going on. They have to hang outside in this gallery here. There's actually a state law on the books that says that you may not be inside the autopsy room without the permission of the chief or his designee. And I was his designee, so that was one space. This was the only room in the state of Maryland where I could tell a police officer that he'd have to move along or I'd have him arrested. I never had the opportunity to exercise that authority, but I was really, really hoping. But in any event, it has some very, very cool features, including a training facility for, I should have given you a trigger warning. These are simulated injuries. Nobody's actually hurt. The woman there on the couch who's playing dead just released her first novel. She's an author friend of mine. But we train forensic investigators this is called Scarpetta House. This woman is rather cheerfully showing a defensive wound, which is really sad when you think about it. This is Dylan Thuris, who is the co-founder of Atlas Obscura. And he joined us to play dead. He actually did a 2-part podcast on the whole process and playing dead for the OCME. And if you go to the Atlas Obscura podcast, you can find it there. But it's best known for this collection of these dioramas, the nutshell studies of unexplained death. These are really amazingly, exquisitely detailed, all in a scale of 1 inch to 1 foot. They're for the most part handmade. I love the little electrical plug there. If you look under the cabinet, they're hanging there. There's a sieve, and then right next to it, there's a hand mixer, a beater. And that's actually a charm bracelet charm that's made out of gold that she had to acquire and then paint to look like steel, just to have a little thing dangling beneath the cabinet. And that's among the reasons why they're so expensive. She really spared no expense to have that level of detail. Just really amazingly work. This is one that I sort of broke down for people. This is called Blue Bedroom. And the story in the front of the cabinet is that this guy came home from work and went upstairs, and his wife, she's downstairs sewing or whatever, and she hears a shot. She runs upstairs and finds it just like this. So you look around and you see there's a gun, a long gun on the floor, and a string going back and forth. I don't know if anybody notices anything that looks peculiar, but there's that string there, and that's basically what you're left with, is to discern whatever you can from the scene that you have there. All the blood spatter on the wall, you see all that detail work that was all done in Francis's own hand. Her strength was in the needlework, all the fabric, all the clothing, anything that's upholstered. That was all done by Francis Glessner Lee. And those drawers are fixed in that position. She actually ran a thread through the dressers to so when a drawer is half open, it's exactly that position that she wanted for the case that she's presenting. In any event, that's one. I don't know how that got there, but they went on exhibit. They had the first and only public exhibition a few years ago at the Smithsonian, literally right across the street from the White House at the Renwick Gallery. It was an unbelievable experience to watch them at work. It was the second most attended exhibit at the Renwick Gallery since its grand opening. And it was only beaten by Burning Man. Burning Man followed right after the nutshell studies and beat it in terms of attendance, but whatever, I don't mind. They exist there. I got more pictures to show you. The nutshells, they sort of have a life of their own. Weirdly, there is a group of people at the University of Wisconsin Parkside in Kenosha. They have they started a crime scene investigation, forensic investigation seminar, and they actually recreated one of the nutshell studies in full scale based on the pictures that they saw online. They were able to reproduce the wallpaper and deduce the dimensions. And it's a large scale thing that you can walk in and walk around, really very pretty amazing. And so it was in 2021, it was last year, I believe it was, maybe it was 22. I just lost track because of the pandemic. They did it again, and they recreated in full size. This one is called Unpapered Bedroom, and the theater department recreated it inch by inch, and did an absolutely amazing job with it. It was a little disorienting being in, but I got to see it, and they actually used this for training. Unlike the dark bathroom that they built last time, this one, I have been urging them to keep them. They were made by the theater department, and it was a space issue. Unpapered Bedroom, they're keeping, and they're building another one for next time. And their goal is to create a collection of life-size, you can walk in these things, dioramas based on the nutshell studies of unexplained death. And because they are life-size, they were able to fill in their own detail, and they made their own little twist with it. But it was really just an amazing training experience for these people to do, and also a piece of work of art. Now, I have some really very cool 3D VR images of some nutshells that look amazing on your cell phone. All you got to do, I'll give them to you if you say gimme. If you send an email to gimme@brucegoldfarb.com, there's an autoresponder which will send you to the links to these images. You put them on your smartphone, you click on it, you hold it up horizontally, and you're inside the diorama, and it's really very cool. They're some of the best 3D images I've ever seen. If you like the dioramas, you're interested, you want to see more, I do have an Instagram profile where I've been posting detail shots, close-ups, things that are not visible to the public, and a lot of cool things that are on Instagram. And my kids encouraged me to get into TikTok, so I've done videos and the dioramas, and there's cool stuff there as well. But they exist for the purposes of training police officers to practice their skills in crime scene investigation, and they're actually still used today for that same purpose because they serve a purpose that no other medium can do. There's no substitute for a real three-dimensional model in front of you. You can't do it with still images or moving pictures, or even virtual reality is not quite there yet to have this little detail as the dioramas. And they're part of this homicide seminar that's held by amazing coincidence at the OCME every year. It's now known as the Francis Glessner Leave Seminar in Homicide Investigation, which is named after the woman who happens to be the subject of my book. Who's the mother of forensic science, yada, yada, yada. And you all know she was born in 1878. Her parents were really fabulously wealthy. They had this great home on Prairie Avenue in Chicago, which still exists. It's been restored with some of the original furnishings, and just a great place to visit if you're ever in Chicago. But she and her brother, they had the two siblings, they're homeschooled, yada, yada. You know all this, steeped in languages and the natural sciences and all these things. They had the home up in New Hampshire. This was called the Rocks, and their summer getaway ended up being around 1,500 acres with 20 or so buildings and a full-time staff of 80 people just to keep it running. Francis got married, had some kids. The marriage didn't stick. They divorced. I believe it was something around 1914, after 7 or so years of marriage, which was quite scandalous at the time. And she remained unmarried for the rest of her life. She had 3 children. She was quite artistically inclined. I mentioned the Chicago Symphony Orchestra miniature that she did. Her dad, the family, was one of the original founders of the orchestra, and they're a big enthusiast of culture, and particularly the orchestra and the Art Institute. And so in 1912, she built this miniature. Her mother had mused how lovely it would be to have the orchestra at the house every day so they could have their own music. And they often did appear at the house, and it gave her the idea of making this diorama in a scale of 1 inch to 1 foot. Some of the faces might look familiar because there's the same little porcelain heads that she used in later dioramas and in some of the nutshells as well. But she did all the instruments, all the furnishings. She did all the clothing, every musician. They were all men at the time. They have paper collars, paper cuffs. She formal evening wear, a little carnation and a lapel, and she had Frederick stock. Each person, of course, represented their real life counterpart. And Frederick Stock, who was the conductor of the Chicago Symphony Orchestra and a friend of the family, wrote out on pieces of paper the size of postage stamps by hand the correct score for each instrument. So every musician in the orchestra has the correct arrangement for his instrument. And she did this entire thing, 90 pieces in 90 days. Just an phenomenal output of work that she did. And then in the following year, she did another miniature, also in a scale of 1 inch to 1 foot, of a famous string quartet called the Flanzeli Quartet. And in the early 20th century, the Flanzeli Quartet were sort of the Foo Fighters of string quartets of the time. And they were the first to have their own record label and allowed them to get a following. And so she was a fan. She invited them over for dinner, and there's a whole passage in the book where this is hidden in the centerpiece, and she reveals it, and a great excitement and all that. And the cello, the instrument second from the right, actually it didn't quite work, but it made a sound. You could play that cello. But in any event, so Frances really is absolutely the one person, the one woman, the only woman to have made a major contribution to the field of forensic science. And she absolutely revolutionized everything, as you all know. And you know about the coroner system, it goes back to medieval England. This is all covered in the book pretty well. And so I don't know if you're, so the coroner had two questions: why did the person die, and who's responsible for the death? And so they'd have a coroner's inquest, and it's basically crowdsourcing death investigation. You have the jury on one side of the room. It's a lot like a grand jury, and they listen to a witness on the other side, and then they vote. You know, who thinks it's an accident, who thinks it's an act of God. Not terribly scientific. In between the jury and the witness are these gentlemen working at the table there. Those are reporters. That's the press, who's there to make sure that every unsubstantiated rumor and accusation and scuttlebutt got into the newspaper, so everybody knew what was going on inside this investigative and adjudicative process. So there are still coroners throughout the country. About half the United States is still on the coroner system. And it's a political system, less than optimal, and the qualifications really vary a lot. Most states that have coroners don't require any kind of training for it. And they're in a place like in South Carolina, they raised the minimum qualification to include a high school diploma. Before then, didn't have to be a high school graduate. But in many states that have coroners, such as Missouri, Indiana, Wisconsin, a bunch of places, the qualification to be a coroner in Missouri, for example, is that you live in a state for a year or more, that you live in that county, the jurisdiction, for at least 6 months, that you're eligible to hold public office, you're over the age of 21, and you get more votes than somebody else. That is it. That's it. Now, by comparison, to be a licensed barber, you have to have 1,500 hours of training and pass a test, but not so to be a coroner. To be a nail technician and legally give a manicure in the state of Missouri, you have to have 500 hours of training and pass a test. But if you're coroner, you're over the age of 21, you're good to go. You can crack open a beer and start signing cause, manner of death. So it's a ridiculous system. By comparison, medical examiners, they're doctors. They've done 4 years of pre-med, 4 years of medical school. Then you do a residency and a specialty. And at that point, you can stop, take your boards, get a job in any hospital or clinical laboratory making really good money. Or you have an additional year of training and a fellowship, and you learn the subspecialty, forensic pathology, and you take your boards, and you earn less money. So it's really questionable how smart forensic pathologists are. They have more training and make less money. So it's really just throughout the country. Some have coroners, some have medical examiners. In general, the urban areas in the East and the West Coast tend to have medical examiners. The flyover states, the red states tend to have coroners, the rural areas. And it breaks down even more granular than that. In New York State, for example, there are medical examiners in the big cities, in New York and Buffalo, Erie County, Rochester, Albany, and Syracuse. But the rest of the state has elected coroners. Now, I grew up in Buffalo, New York. I'm glad I'm not there now. But in Erie County, there's as there is in every jurisdiction, there's a boundary line where Erie County ends and then Genesee County picks up. And so there are places, and this is true in many, many places, where if somebody dies on one side of the street, that death is investigated by a medical examiner who is a doctor and a civil servant. And if somebody dies on the other side of the double yellow line, that death is investigated by a coroner of unknown qualifications who's a politician who got the job because he got elected to it. And that is it. So you just never know who is doing the investigation, under what circumstances, what the training is, what the qualifications are, where the investigation, the autopsy is done. It can vary. It can be in a hospital, a funeral home, some guy's garage, or just not at all, or in a real state-of-the-art facility such as it's done here in Baltimore. You just never know. So in any event, Frances is actually the woman who is responsible for this evolution from the coroner system to the medical examiner system. And she learned it from George Burgess McGrath. Now, McGrath was an interesting guy that back when they were younger, George McGrath was Frances Glessner Lee's brother's best friend. They went to Harvard together. George Glessner went to business school. He was headed towards a career in law. George Burgess McGrath was in medical school. He was trained in pathology. And in 1907, he was appointed as a medical examiner in Boston and in Suffolk County. He was the second person to hold the job. Boston had the first medical examiner's office in the country. He was the second person. He was actually the first pathologist in the country to be appointed as a medical examiner. He was literally America's first forensic pathologist. I'm going to admit somebody. Joan wants in. I admitted her. And so McGrath, when he was appointed as a medical examiner, he realized that he was not qualified. He didn't have any training for it, what was then called legal medicine. So he took time off to spend, basically did his own fellowship in the leading capitals of legal medicine in Europe, in Vienna and in Edinburgh, London, and Paris, and learned about these scientific principles of death investigation. And when he returned to the United States and back in Boston, he incorporated these principles into his own work as a medical examiner, and he was also lectured to Harvard Medical School. So he really literally introduced that whole concept of forensic death investigation to the United States. He got quite a reputation as a crime doctor. He was involved in many high-profile cases. They're covered in the book. Many people may have heard of the Great Boston Molasses disaster, which is a really horrible thing. This massive vat of molasses split open and killed a bunch of people and knocked buildings off the foundation and crushed vehicles and carriages and horses, and it was really horrible. He was the medical examiner on that case. He was also the medical examiner in the Sacco and Vanzetti case, and the death of Babe Ruth's first wife. He had a reputation as scientific principles, and was called on cases throughout Massachusetts and throughout New England and elsewhere. It was much later in his life. Frances knew him when she was a teenager. They went to the 1893 World's Fair when he was still a Harvard student. She was 15 years old, but it wasn't until middle age, 1929, when she was 52 years old, where she rekindled her friendship with McGrath when they were recuperating together in Boston. And they spent some time together in the summer of 1929, and he discussed his work. He discussed the coroner system, medical examiners, and all these things. And it was like a switch flipped in her mind. She knew what she had to do for the rest of her life. And she dedicated her life and her fortune to bring McGrath's vision of forensic death investigation to life. And so what she did at the time that she got involved in forensic medicine, medical examiners only existed in 3 places in the country. Boston was first in 1877, New York City in 1918, and Newark, New Jersey. That was it. The entire rest of the country was still on the coroner system. And she dedicated her life to spread it from coast to coast. And what she called the 3-legged stool of legal medicine. You have to change the law, you have to address the manpower issue and train the police. So she worked tirelessly, lobbying to reform laws, to abolish coroners, adopt medical examiners. You also have to strengthen laws where there were medical examiners, because in Boston, for example, although George McGrath was the person with the specialized training to know when a death might be suspicious and require merit further investigation, he didn't have independent authority to start an investigation. He had to wait until he was called upon by police or prosecutors, and by then the dead body had been moved to a funeral parlor or buried or is in a hospital, emergency ward, and all the facts of the thing have been changed. So you have to change that. And she did. She worked in many, many, many states, not just Massachusetts and New Hampshire. She was involved in both, lobbying firsthand and helping other states get their programs off the ground. The second thing was we need to train more doctors. Even if everybody from coast to coast went to medical examiner system, there's nobody to fill those roles. So she gave a fortune to Harvard Medical School, the equivalent of 3.4 million. Alan Moritz here, who is from Ohio, was the first chairman. And he was a very well regarded forensic pathologist. They worked very closely together. He was the sort of a technical advisor in the dioramas to make sure that they're accurate, medically accurate. And she also was a really avid collector of books. She had a voracious appetite. Anything she could get her hands on. She was fluent in German, Italian, French. She could read and write Latin, and so she did anything she could get her hands on in criminology, surgery, trauma, anything related to the field. She purchased. She got many exquisitely, just amazingly valuable and rare volumes, and she donated her entire collection of books to the Harvard Medical School. She called it the George Burgess McGrath Library of Medicine, but it's actually Frances Glessner Lee's library. It's her books. She also, the book plate, by the way, she designed. There's all kinds. I was looking at it the other day to see. It looks like the staff of a scapulus. I'm not sure what it is on the left. It looks like a flame. I'm not sure. The fish. I'm not sure. There might be porpoises, but I'm sure there's symbolism in all these things. But in any event, when she established the library, it was the largest of its kind in the world. And by the time she got done with it, she had tripled it in size. And she was a key person in translating texts from foreign language. She made sure that if there's a leading book in Europe, that it would be the right person would translate it into English for the American market. So she did that. And then they duplicated these efforts, working with other universities, several other universities. And the biggest piece is, of course, training the police. Back in the day, they were not exactly the best and the brightest. A lot of police were illiterate. You didn't have to have interviewing skills and critical thinking skills if you could beat a confession out of somebody. So she established the seminar in 1945 at Harvard Medical School to train police in scientific death investigation principles. And she made sure that the program was equipped with the instructional media, anything that they would need. She spared no expense. I did the calculations. This collection of bullet wounds, which were made for her, this set cost her approximately $35,000 to have done for the medical school. She had these models, teaching models created, which show different causes of death and the effects on the body. And of course, this is why she made the nutshell studies. The rest of it, it's the seminar that's still held, which is why it's named after her, and it's still held, they're still conducted in the same way. If you read online, it annoys me to no end when I read that she was a honorary captain, honorary police captain, which is technically true, and that she was honorary in Massachusetts and Vermont and Connecticut and Maryland and Virginia and a bunch of states. But in New Hampshire, she was the real deal. She was commissioned as a captain. She served as the director of education for the New Hampshire State Police starting in 1943. She was 66 years old. I used to, this was hanging in my office. I had this, and this is the original. And it says that she had arrest powers to enforce criminal laws. She had a gold shield that she carried in her purse, but she was a real captain, and she was Captain Lee for the rest of her life. It was important for her to reach out and change the mind of the American public. And this is one person that she developed a close friendship with, Earl Stanley Gardner, who is the author of the Perry Mason books. He was through the 40s, 50s, 60s, the top-selling author in the United States. And she persuaded him to turn his attention to forensic medicine, which he eventually did, but he was right at the time that she was meeting up with him. He was doing his Perry Mason TV show for CBS. So he got a little sidetracked for a bit, but he did. And another part, I knew that she was involved in a feature film. I knew that the sort of the outlines of it, the sketches of it, but I didn't know the details of it. And when I was doing my research, I found the first draft of the treatment of the film that they were calling Murder at Harvard. And she went to, Frances Glessner Lee approached the Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer studios in 1947, 1948, and pitched the idea of doing a film based on forensic medicine, legal medicine. And they were intrigued because it was the post-war period, the tastes of the American public were changing. They wanted more of a documentary style. This was a new twist on an old idea. There'd been all sorts of murder mysteries, but there had not been a movie that featured a medical examiner. And so they sent a writer to Boston to meet with the people, and he came back and he wrote this treatment of a feature film called Murder at Harvard, which begins in the Department of Legal Medicine. There's the homicide seminar, and there's the nutshell studies of unexplained death there, and this older woman who's sitting at the table, and then there's a flashback and the whole thing. Now, Frances said, no, she take me out of it. I don't want it about me. It's not about me. Focus on the subject. That's the important thing. And she suggested that they base it on a true story. The case that it's based on, her name is Irene Perry, and she's a young woman, 22 years old, who was found dead in Cape Cod. And so they did that. And they used that case, changing some names. And Harvard objected to Murder at Harvard. They didn't want Murder and Harvard anywhere near one another. Take Murder, Harvard, the whole thing. So they renamed it Mystery Street, which came out in 1950. This film featured Ricardo Montalban, actually plays a Cape Cod sheriff who goes to Harvard Medical School for their help in solving a murder. It features body identification, forensic anthropology, ballistics, and this technology was brand new at the time, cutting edge forensic photography, which Alan Morris had just learned about when he did his fellowship in Edinburgh. It had just been used in the Ruxton case, and it was a key piece of evidence that convicted the guy. And so Mystery Street is actually the first procedural forensic science drama, the first of the genre that leads to Quincy and CSI, and it's the most popular, one of the most popular genres in pop fiction and podcasts and films and streaming and movies and on and on and on. So, far from this, you read about her and she sounds like this elderly woman who's sort of making creepy dollhouses, a rich woman with too much time on her hands, as she said. She was a very central figure in the field of forensic medicine, a real driving force. And when she died in 1962, the accolades came in from all over that she transformed the field and was really regarded as one of the leading people, one of the leading authorities in forensic medicine, and truly a central person. So that basically, in a nutshell, is what I had for you there. I don't know if you want to talk about. I'm going to stop the sharing here. What I got going on. Wait a minute, where am I?
Yeah, I think we could do that. And then, I mean, I don't know if you'd want to go into some of the other cases that you mentioned, because I'm not sure if everyone here has read the book. So maybe you could talk a little bit about some of those, just kind of the gist.
Of the nutshells?
Yeah.
I have a question.
Yes.
Have you seen the film Mystery Street? Because I tried to find it, and after seeing it in your book, and I couldn't find it. Like there's a little information about it online, but there's no copy of it anywhere.
I got a copy on Amazon.
You were able to find it on Amazon?
Yeah, I got. Oh, it's awesome.
Is it digital, or do you have to have like a VHS? What is it?
It's a DVD. I wish I could rip it. I wish I could post it. You know, at the Glessner house, he has a copy of it too, and they do a viewing every year on her birthday, March 25th. But yeah, it's available. Yeah, it's out there. It's a film noir classic. I mean, it really is. But I mean, you can see the elements of, based on a real case, changing the names to protect the innocent. The whole, the formula is just so recognizable. But it's really very cool that they, sort of did this for the film.
And based on your research, why do you think that today, in 2022, we still have so many states using the coroner system? Like, I understand the whole patronage and everything else, and the people don't want to give up power. But after the CSIs and the Quincy's and all the evidence that shows you how it should be, why are some of these states still lagging?
Well, you hit on part of it, is that there is there's a tendency towards, for people to, we've always done it this way. It works okay, so why change it? Because they are elected people. Local politicians are reluctant to give up political authority to a state, just to give it up. I mean, it is a political plum. So there's that. There is some upfront expense that's involved. Dr. Fowler, who used to be who was my boss, what he said was, dead people don't vote, and living people don't want to spend money, is what it amounts to. And there really isn't a constituency pushing for it. We don't have a Francis Glessner Lee these days. I'm trying to do what I can to at least, bring the message to people like, yourself, who are, aware of it. But I mean, there are some logistics involved, and there's some expenses. In a state like Wyoming, I mean, there are some states where they're so large and so rural that it gets difficult to provide that expertise from wall to wall. Maryland is a very small state. Maryland was the first statewide system in 1939, but New Mexico is also statewide, and they use helicopters. I mean, it can be done, but you really need to have enlightened people. It's going to cost you up front. It's going to cost, but in the long term, you save money. And this is like Tennessee, and they're I think they have like regional offices, or even smaller. They're each county. I don't know if it's by county by county, but if you invested the money up front to build a really, really good facility that can serve.
So did You may have frozen here.
Oh, because it,
Hold on, you're freezing.
Maybe we should turn off our camera.
Oh, yeah, maybe. Hold on, I'll turn off our camera. Maybe that will help. There we go.
oh, okay.
Yeah,
So-
so I just turned off our camera. Hopefully that helps. Oh, maybe not.
Froze again. There it is.
You've been freezing on and off. But he's gonna come back.
Okay.
Put me, put us in front of us.
Yes, I think I have to admit him again.
Hit him again, yeah. Up, you're back.
All right, you're back.
But you're muted. Okay, can you hear us? Can you hear us?
Yeah. Sorry
Okay, we
about
lost you,
that.
but you're back.
I don't know what happened. I just.
Yeah,
something
you
was
just
popping up.
froze.
Oh, okay.
We're talking about Tennessee.
Right, because there's, they have like, I think by county. And it costs a bit of, it costs a lot of money. The OCME of Maryland, for example, that was like $40 million. So it's just really, really tough to convince a state, if you got to put this hunk of money up front to build a really high quality forensic medical center that can serve a large area, and that it would save money in the long term and provide better quality. There's just a lot of inertia, indifference, and resistance.
Yeah, I guess the money and the giving up of the local power, but it just seems like they're doing such a disservice to their constituents to not have real medical examiners looking for the real causes.
It's that gets into the subject of my next book, OCME, because because of these TV shows, CSI, if people assume that when somebody dies, that there's this team of well-trained professionals that goes to the scene and combs over everything for evidence, and there's this they do a sophisticated autopsy and using all this technology, but actually that rarely happens. In most places, it's not like that at all. I don't think that people are aware of how bad things are in many parts of the country.
Absolutely, people have no clue.
Nope. Alex asked, has there been a movie or documentary made about Frances? There actually is a documentary. It was made by Susan Marks of Minneapolis. She's a friend of mine. It's called Of Dolls and Murder, which is also available. There has not been a feature film. They're working on that, hopefully sometime soon. So you want to see more pictures of the dioramas, or I want to see if I can get the these 3D ones. I can show you the 3D ones. You still with me?
Yeah.
Okay. Didn't know one or the other of us froze.
I just made you the host again, so.
So, the dioramas, it's important to appreciate that, they're not meant to be solved. That's a big thing. They're not puzzles. All right, here is, this is a good one. Why can't I?
They're not working to share the screen.
It's, I'm trying to, you can't see that, can you?
No.
Darn it. Great. Wait, I got too many things going on here.
So hi, this is Ellen. I'm actually listening to this from Cape Cod. And
Yes,
I just want to let the, somebody asked about trying to find the movie. I just went on my local library site and the movie is available. It was called Act of Violence. So it's with a bunch of other movies, probably in the same genre. So it is out there, just to let you know that you can get it from the library.
I can't show, it won't show, let me show YouTube. There
I
is a
found that.
version, there is a version of where there's 2 DVDs on it's not going to work. For some reason I can't show a YouTube video.
Yeah, I see it on Amazon. It's a two-parter, but Active Violence is a separate movie that is sold with Mystery Street.
That's right. They made an edition. I got just the Mystery Street, but I noticed that there is an edition where it has 2 movies and 2
Well,
films on the one
I
DVD.
think this one actually has 4 different movies, and I think it is kind of the original because it had Roberto Montalban or whatever. He was one of the actors in it, so I think it is the original. So I was just saying for whoever asked it, I think you can get it through your local library, or at least the one that I went through was the Falmouth Public Library. So they do have a copy because I just requested it and I'm going to watch it. So
It's a real hoot. I'm trying to get this thing.
Yeah, I'll look at our library system too and maybe put a hold on it for when it becomes available, if I can find it. That's not part of Oklahoma, is it?
I'm not sure. I don't think so. Would it work if I somehow looked it up online and then brought it up on ours?
Oh, and the links that I sent is what I'm trying to get run.
Yeah, I'm wondering if I can do that.
So how did you get into all of this, Bruce? Like how did you get into all this forensic pathology when you were young?
I didn't when I was young. I sort of fell into it. I came to it by journalism.
Oh,
So just
There.
tell us a little bit about,
Oh, okay, you got it.
And you can
such
look at it.
details. When I was reading about it, I was just amazed that just how well she was versed in so many different arts, with her language, with her
newspaper.
reading, with her needlework.
Oh, she was phenomenal. So the newspaper stuffed in the door there.
I mean, she covered every detail. Like she didn't
Oh, yeah.
forget.
even things that you can't see.
Yeah.
That was what.
And to be able to create them in such miniature, I mean, she must have had such good, like, my hands would shake. I wouldn't be able to do the work that she did. I mean, I'm just fascinated by her.
I think that's a doll on the floor, right? Or is
Yeah.
that a person?
Well, it's supposed to be a person, but obviously it's a doll because these are miniatures.
Yeah,
Those are custom made pieces. She could not find figures where that you could pose. The only thing, the figures that were available for doll houses were made to stand up, so they had like a base on them. So she had to make her own. She stuffed them with, depending on her needs, either a lead shot or sawdust or things just to give them the heft. And she had to make the hands and feet and the clothing. But whoops, I have no idea what that is. We're done with that. All right, so anyways, oh my God. All right. You still there?
Yeah, we're here.
Okay. So I forget where we were, so I had to close the YouTube thing.
So if you can't bring up the 3Ds again, tell us a little more about how, as a journalist, you got into this.
Well, I was writing. I was a freelance writer for many years, and years ago, I wrote an article for American Medical News, which is the weekly newspaper of the American Medical Association. And I was a real hustler as a writer, so I'm going to try to, maximize and do whatever I can, because it's, got to make what you can. And American Medical News paid really well for, I think it was like $1,200, $1,500. Even back then, it was a lot of money for stories about doctors with interesting hobbies. And so I sort of took that up, and I interviewed. I actually did a profile of a gang of motorcycling doctors. I wrote about a doctor who who studied ancient Egyptian papyri. And I heard about this collection of dioramas at the medical examiner's office, the nutshell studies, and I figured that was enough of a medical angle. And so I did that. I wrote about the story, and that was it. And one and done. But people kept asking me to arrange a visit, and I kept going back to the medical examiner's office again and again and again and again. But in any event, back in 2012, I was writing for it was a network owned by AOL Huffington Post called Patch, hyperlocal news. And they had all these basically covering this little community. And my community was Southwest Baltimore County here in Arbutus. And I met a guy, Mike Eagle, who worked at the medical examiner's office, and he was in my community, and we became friends. And he was a source of information. And I knew that he worked at the medical examiner's office, and they had this brand new building that had just opened up, a state-of-the-art facility. And so I asked Mike to arrange a tour for a group of patch editors. And so about 12 of us went. And when we were walking through, we we're actually inside Scarpetta House, and he's showing us stuff. And he mentioned that they had this new position for a public information officer. They were looking for an executive assistant for the chief medical examiner who would work directly for the chief in the chief's office. And an ideal candidate would be somebody who was an EMT, that had an EMT background, and journalism experience. So, I mean, yeah, I used to be an EMT. I mean, that's me. So I got the job, and it was the coolest thing ever. And I worked directly for the chief. Now, one of the things I discovered is that there's a lot of similarity between forensic investigation and journalism. Investigating is investigating. They're both about checking your facts, determining a fact from an opinion, what you know for sure versus what may or may not be true. They both involve really critical thinking skills. And really what a medical examiner is trying to do is to take all the facts that are known and to distill this into a succinct summary of why this person died. So they're literally writing the last chapter of a person's life. But we're very like-minded, and I helped in various ways, and it just the processes were very similar, and it was just a way of me to applying really just every sort of skill set that I could muster. The job was amazing, and the weird thing was that through the whole process of employment and hiring and all that, the nutshells were never mentioned once that I knew about them or anything like that. It never came up in anything, had absolutely nothing to do with the nutshells. But once I got the job, the guy who was the keeper of the nutshell secrets, Jerry D, literally threw the keys at me, the keys to the cabinets, and he said, "You can deal with them now. They're your problem. You can look after them and change the light bulbs and do all these things." So I had the experience of learning about them and looking at them, examining them up close, and learning so much more about them. And I was the only one who was willing to entertain visitors and filmmakers or photographers wanted to look at them. When the Smithsonian came and they met with me, and so I became I became the de facto curator of them, and would collect anything, documents and anything like that I could find. And so it was really fortuitous and something that was I couldn't have tried to do that if I wanted to. I couldn't have done it if I tried. It was just a fluke that I ended up working with the nutshells.
So, sort of random, but I think you said something about McGrath being involved with the death, or involved in investigating the death of Babe Ruth's first wife, but I don't recall that coming up in the book.
Oh, I thought it did. Wolford. Yeah. It's a great story. Babe Ruth actually, I don't think that at the time, this was what, 1929, Babe Ruth was by far the most famous athlete in the United States. And the general public did not know that he had actually gotten married quite young when he was 18, 19 years old. This woman, Wolford, they didn't stay together, but she turned out, she wound up living in Massachusetts. What's the town? Small town in Massachusetts, living with a dentist under an assumed name. And she died in a suspicious fire. So the whole thing was just like, what? He's married? Oh, the whole thing was just, and for a week, it was just crazy that the whole thing was just, things were not adding, it just didn't make any sense. But as it turned out, the fire was due to faulty wiring, and she died from smoke inhalation. There was absolutely nothing suspicious about her death at all. But for a few days there, it was a huge story. You can imagine some athlete, the ex-wife of an athlete you didn't realize was married winds up dead. It would just be, it was shocking and a little titillating and interesting, but turned out to be nothing to it.
Yeah, I was thinking of the Florence Small murder, but I guess it didn't turn out being like that.
Florence Small was a good one. He almost got away with murder. And Burn Cabin is based on, I am 99% certain, that's based on the Florence Small death. And but that was a really good one where he almost got away with murder. There's another really good one. This it's backwards, I realize, but OCME that there's going to many other historically significant cases, some by Russell Fisher. They're sort of companion books in that 18 Tiny Deaths is sort of like his history of forensic medicine leading up to the modern era. And OCME is a case study of what happens in the modern era in one particular system. But there's actually some flow through between the books. And I think if you enjoy one, you'll probably enjoy the other, but that's just my opinion.
I'm sure we will.
I'm looking forward to it. I've always been interested in forensic medicine. I grew up watching Quincy, more so than CSI. I always liked.
Yeah, I don't know.
It's really not like it's so different than TV. People ask me all the time when I left there at the end of August. I'm now doing medical writing, but people want to know. Number one question is, what's it like to work there? What's your day like? What exactly do you do? And so that's what it is, and it shows what it's like to work behind the scenes on a day-to-day basis. I was there in some, during like the Freddie Gray case, Sean Suter. I don't know if you all saw the HBO We Own the City. My boss was involved in the murder trial of Derek Chauvin, which was a whole sort of backlash. But what happened was, and the OCME was regarded as the gold standard of forensic medical centers. Really one of the best in the United States, if not the world. Just regarded as a stability and reliability and all these things. And because of the opiate epidemic and violence and a variety of other things that were going on, just really such a dramatic plunge into crisis. Just it got so unbelievable. It's still bad. It's still bad. So it documents sort of like this rise and fall, and it fell really it fell hard. Alex, why Frances Glessner Lee isn't more well known and famous? Because it was her choice. There were actually quite a number of things written about her and the dioramas in the 1940s, 1950s. She was in every major magazine, Life magazine, I mean, mentioned at least. And frankly, she got sick of it. It was the same sort of thing where she was pigeonholed as a rich old lady who made creepy dollhouses, and that was basically it. And she felt it was a caricature. It really, she did not want the attention, and she chose not to. That she did not want to be. She's really quite a reserved and modest woman, and did not want to be the center of attention. And she was willing to let herself be used if it got the attention to write about the subject, the whole weirdness of the dollhouses. She understood that that's what got people curious, but she used that as a means to explain the importance of the subject. So it was her choice that she was not better known.
So you mentioned that your boss, whose name I can't recall, I know you said it at one point. But you mentioned that he was involved in investigating George Floyd's death. So I can't remember whether you said, does Minnesota have a medical examiner system?
They do. Yeah, they do. And so does Massachusetts does, of course, but yes, but yeah.
So I guess they consulted the OCME because it's so well regarded.
No, things got really bad in 2019. The OCME, since it was established in 1939, only had 4 chiefs in its entire history, 80 years. It was really just an extraordinary continuity from day one there. And Dr. Fowler resigned at the end of 2019. Things are going down the toilet. He realized it and bailed. And it was a few months later, we learned that he was actually, as a private forensic pathologist, one of the best in the country, he had been retained as part of a panel called the Forensics Panel of 12 people who testified for the defense of Derek Chauvin.
Oh, okay.
Wow.
And, yeah. And so I I got phone calls and emails and all sorts of hateful things from all around the world. I had people call me up telling me I was a fascist, I'm a racist, I'm a puppet of a corrupt government. That prompted the Maryland Attorney General. There was a petition that was circulated online, and the Maryland Attorney General announced a review of deaths of people in the custody of police during Dr. Fowler's tenure, going back to 2001. And the letter from the Attorney General's office was actually addressed to me by name. I was the one they made. It was awful. It's all in the book. It was just terrible. So yeah, it went through some changes. It just really got just real bad, just really bad. But you can Google Fowler. You could. He said that that I'm not an apologist for him. I'm not a forensic pathologist. But he pointed out things like possible carbon monoxide intoxication, fentanyl intoxication, and suggested that his death might be best classified as undetermined.
Wow.
It was bad.
It's just wow that an esteemed, learned person like that would, it almost like he was saying whatever he could to cast out because he was getting paid to testify.
That's what people think. I know it's not true. I know it's not true.
Yeah, I mean, as I understand it, even if there was fentanyl involved or something, still the pressure would have.
Yeah, I mean, to the public, the way it's been portrayed to the public, it seems pretty obvious that putting the knee on the neck is what suffocated her.
I'm not a forensic pathologist, I don't know what to say. But we still communicate every now and then. He actually cooperated with the book. So he let me interview him a few times.
Yeah, hey, people can have difference of opinions and still be friends. Or colleagues.
People, doctors testify in criminal and civil cases every day. It's done all the time. Back in whatever it was, 2017, Jonathan Arden, who was the chief medical examiner in Washington, D.C., testified for the defense of one of the police officers who was involved in Freddie Gray's death, suggested that Freddie Gray might have actually injured himself. That was his opinion. There weren't petitions circulated. There wasn't, this mass outrage and all these things. I don't understand, why it's an opinion. In the Derek Chauvin trial, and what he was not able to express was that there was a panel of 12 people, including toxicologists, forensic pathologists, and other specialists. And this was the consensus of the panel, not just his own opinion. So, when you are called to be a witness in a trial, you're not allowed, an hour, hour and a half, 2 hours to give a presentation to explain your, evidence as you see it. You're asked questions and you have to answer very narrowly what the questions are. And so, it's got to be frustrating that you're not allowed, you don't have a, you can't explain yourself.
So you said the word frustrating. So this brings us back to the book. When we had our discussion of the book last month, one of the things that we talked about was how frustrating it was that Harvard basically used Frances for her money, but never really respected her. And never really did any of the long-term goals, never had the foresight that she had. And that must have been frustrating for her.
And you're absolutely right, but they used each other. She knew that they were using her. She was fully aware that there are money grubbing people. Yes, she felt hurt that she was not accepted as a colleague. She should have been. But at the same time, she was glomming on Harvard because they had the reputation, it had that aura of, the whole elite thing. And so she used that to her full advantage as well. But yeah, and they did have a very serious falling out in the 1950s.
And they never really appreciated how much work between her and them, that how much work they had done, the fact that they closed the program after she, died. I feel like they wasted a lot of the good that they had, that their cooperation had done.
There's not one mention of Frances Glessner Lee at Harvard to this day. They have a Frances Glessner Lee professor. There is a Frances, because she did this, the endowment or whatever it is, but there's a Frances Glessner Lee professor of legal medicine at Harvard. And that is actually filled by a pediatric ethicist. It's not even had nothing to do with forensic medicine. They don't even have a forensic pathologist on the faculty of Harvard. They have they've thrown her in the memory hole, wiped her out completely. And yeah, it's true. And I don't even think, it was a condition of hers that the the McGrath Library of Legal Medicine stay together as a special collection. And they didn't even respect that. It's just been, they just took all our books and they're in the general collection of the County Library.
Such a pity.
It is a pity.
Yeah, they didn't take the suggestion of having one medical examiner who everyone else answers to. I mean, that was the other thing she suggested.
It took forever, you know, she called it right from the, she had the right idea, you know, she knew exactly the way it should be organized. You know.
How different do you think this ending would have been had she been a man?
It's
How
an
would that
interesting,
journey have been different?
it's an interesting question. But I will say this. Frances Glessner Lee had a number of things to overcome. Aside from being a woman, she was older. She didn't get started until she was 52. Her most productive work were between the ages of 67 and 82, 67 and 80. So that, you know, really a 13-year period towards the end of her life. She had medical problems. She had just problem after problem after problem. She was hospitalized many times. She had bad joints. She was going deaf. She went blind, but she just never stopped working. But the most serious one, in her own words, the most serious obstacle was her lack of academic credentials. Not having that degree really set her back. It makes it much more, I mean, that's why they would never, you know, acknowledge her, even in the program or anything like that, because she didn't even have a high school diploma.
She's probably smarter than all of them.
Oh, please. She was leading them by the nose and teaching them what they needed to know. She knew more than anybody. Absolutely. But yeah, it's, you know, it was being a woman in a man's world. Yes. I mean, that was the thing. I don't think it was the biggest thing. So, you know, even if she were a man, she would still be you know, an older, you know, man with no credentials and a whole bunch of medical problems. There would still be challenges, but I think that she would have gotten it done anyways. You know, I don't know how she would have been received differently. But, you know, one of the things I observed about Frances, there's a bit in the book about the rocks in New Hampshire, in the White Mountains, and the local people who live in Littleton, in the town. They, you know, the wealthy newcomers would buy these homes up in the elevations so they get the gorgeous view, and the locals lived down in the town. So there was what they called the up the hill and down the hill, there were like two different societies, Frances never really fit in either one. She was never really, even though she spent the you know, decades of her life in Littleton, she was never really accepted as a local. And she didn't quite fit into that society up the hill either, where there's receptions and all these fancy things and the elite. You know, she was always a woman out of place. She was a person out of place. She was neither here or there. She was a woman in a man's world. She was a you know, a homeschooled person in the academic world. But you know, that was her whole life, was being a person out of place and making her own way.
Yeah, she was pretty amazing.
Definitely.
Warren, what are you looking in the book for?
Oh, well, I was just trying to remind myself of when she was trying to get the new library and she was arguing with the guy who
Yes.
guy.
Yes.
Dr. Reed Hunt. I couldn't remember his name and I was trying to find that.
Yes. God, I love that. I love that. Reading the correspondence. And it just got a whole, they wanted to cut that out of the book, but I thought, you know, that really shows her personality, you know, that she arm twists the president of Harvard. I want that room. And
Yeah.
I want you to think about I want you to think about it and reconsider your decision.
I suggest that you give this problem a little further study.
You want my money, you're gonna give me the room.
Yeah.
She,
They got
oh,
but definitely it worked.
Yeah, oh yeah. I mean, yeah, she was a force of nature. I got the small print edition of the book.
Oh.
There's actual words on the pages.
Wow.
Now, who made that for you?
This was produced by a small press.
Something Frances didn't have access to when she was making all her small prints.
I actually, my COVID skill when we were, I was furloughed briefly, but that was my COVID craft. I learned how to miniature bookbinding. I made them. It's in the same scale as the nutshell studies, 1 to 12.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that should be useful if you decide that you're going to start doing models like her.
People ask, do I do dioramas? No, I don't have $100,000 to spend on one of those things. No, I couldn't do it nearly. I know a lot of miniaturists because they flock to the dioramas. So, I can't, I'm not nearly that talented. I can't, I just can't. I don't even try. It's
The artistic skill required, it just boggles the mind.
I look at a lot of these videos, the way artists are able to distress the materials, and aging and those sorts of things. I've been wanting to make a terrarium for a while, and my thought was I want to make basically a little dump. I want to just make it like a conduit coming out of some shrubbery and have like a little miniature shopping cart and just trash. It looked like just a little thing there, like people threw things. So I've been looking for miniature props and things, and I do want to do that and learn how to make this galvanized pipe, which you can get from railroad, the scenery stuff. You can get some of these materials, but to make a little conduit and a little ravine that looks filthy and trash, and I just think it would make an interesting terrarium.
Yeah. Other questions?
Well, I personally want to thank you. I mean, I really enjoyed the book. I really enjoyed your presentation. I think she's a fascinating woman. It's great to learn about someone that had such an enduring presence on something that is so needed to, you know what I mean? Like you said, we all watch the CSIs and everyone thinks it's just the way things are done, and to find out that, she really pioneered it. It was fascinating. I found the whole book fascinating. I didn't quite understand a little bit in the beginning when you're going through her childhood and all these different people, and I'm like, why is this important? And then obviously as the book progresses, you realize how all that early stuff was important.
That's exactly right. Because it shaped who she was, and to understand her family's, their obsession with furnishings and all these things. Yeah, she was very much a product of her upbringing, and I think her exposure to culture and architecture, everything, it used all these skills that she then applied and put into the dioramas. The interior decorating, all of it, everything. And she used the social skills, these tools that she used, entertaining people, flattering, and all these things, the social graces that she had learned, she applied then to further her own goals in legal medicine.
And it's the confidence and independence. Like you said, it was scandalous when she got divorced, but coming from money, she had a confidence that a lot of other women didn't have. And she knew she'd financially be fine, so she was free to just, take her family and do what she wanted to do. Which,
and she made sure that her own children, that her daughter, would not be dependent, that they would be independent themselves, that they would not be in the same situation, that they would not be dependent on the spouse. So she passed it on to her own children, is that basically you got to look after yourself and depend on yourself.
I gave them stocks from International Harvester.
Yeah, they did. Yep.
More people need to know about her. You need to keep up what you're doing and make her name a household name, because people need to know about her.
I'm working on it. The greatest, the most satisfying thing to hear is I never heard, I had no idea. And it's just awesome. It's just awesome. It's awesome. People send me photos. They do their own little dioramas. The high school classes, and they hear about her. It's so great. And there is, nothing to publicly announce yet, but have been working on the screenwrites. Obviously, there's a lot of interest in the screenwrites, and I hope that within, I don't know when. Something will come of it sooner or later. It's gonna, in some format, but there will be a feature presents in some way. I don't know if it's, series or feature film or what, but there's interest.
Yeah, it's a fascinating story. I'm surprised it's taken this long for it to come to light. Especially with how much people love, like the whole idea of forensic medicine, that she isn't better known is just, I find it so strange.
And we were among that group you talked about. We had no idea who she was until the book was suggested for book club.
Yeah. She really is a pivotal figure. It is a shame that she's not better known. I spend a lot of my time correcting myths that I read online. I keep reading the same bad stuff over and over again, that she was forbidden to go to college, that she was an honorary captain and all these things. And it's, if I spend the rest of my life talking about Frances Glessner Lee and setting the record straight and informing people about what she did, I would love it. It would just be, she deserves it. She's an amazing person.
Yeah, it is.
Do you want to ask if the other four people have any questions? Because they're all.
Oh, okay. Anyone else have any questions? You can ask on the chat if you want to.
You can ask on the chat. You can find me on Facebook. I'm at brucegoldfarb.com. I'm there. Keep your eyes out for the OCME book. That's coming out in February.
Does the email gimme@brucegoldfarb.com, does that work on the computer too, or almost on the phone for the 3D view? Is it just the phone?
Gimme at, oh yeah, they look better actually on the phone. If you have VR goggles, you can put your phone in the goggles. If you get the kids got it, it's really very cool. But it looks, if you put them on your phone, you hold your phone up and you can look all over the room. It is so cool.
All right. Oh, one person has a question, Alex.
Did she make any artwork besides the nutshells? Yes, she did the Chicago Symphony Orchestra, 90 pieces. That is in Chicago. It's at the CSO. There's actually a few pieces that are on, I think there's 4 or 5 of them that are presently on exhibit at the Glessner House in Chicago. The Glessner House is on Facebook and Instagram as well. They have pictures of these figures. The Flanzeli Quartet that she did in 1912, unveiled in 1913. That, my understanding is in Switzerland. She gave that to the Flanzeli Quartet, and that's in a museum in Switzerland. That's all I know. I have not seen any other photos of it. It would be nice to visit it sometime. I have no idea where it is these days. But she and the family were quite productive. Her mom was a jewelry maker. I mean, there are crafts from her and the family all over the place. I've seen needle points and embroidery and those sorts of things that Frances did as well. She was before television and things like that, it's what people did, is to kept busy by making stuff. But she did cross stitch and a bunch of stuff, but which is still around. But the big pieces are the dioramas and the orchestra.
Did you do the Floresi Quartet too, or am I?
Yeah, that's what he talked about. It's the one in the museum in Switzerland.
Oh,
Great.
Yeah, I remember the whole scene where the dinner and she picked up the centerpiece and it was there.
yeah.
Yeah.
All right, any other questions?
Well, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for giving us your time.
This was
It's
great.
been fascinating.
I meant to live stream it, but I forgot to do that, so I'm hoping I can share it later.
That'd be great. And if you do post it somewhere, send me the link so I can put it out and,
Yeah, we recorded this, so I can
yeah.
record it.
All right. Well, thank you very much for having me. Honestly, I never get tired of talking about Francis Glessner in the nutshells, and I'm glad that you find her interesting and, you know, help her find her place in her deserved place in the history books.
Thank you so
you.
much.
Thank
This
you.
was great.
Can't wait for
I,
You bet.
really appreciate you reaching out. That was
Oh,
awesome.
it was great. Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for setting everything up, Warren.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Bye-bye.
Thank
All right.
you.
Bye-bye. Y'all take care.
Bye.
Oh, we should have turned on the-
Yeah, probably.